Single Dad fixed the CEO's stalled helicopter. Days later, she learned he designed the rotor. The afternoon Helena Marsh's executive helicopter came down hard on the apron of a small regional field, with a vibration in the rotor that her own pilot did not like. The only person on the field who walked toward the sound instead of away from it was a lineman in coveralls named Wes Carver, wiping his hands on a rag, listening to the rotor wind down with his head tilted, the way a man tilts his head at a sound only he can hear. He was 42, lean and broad through the shoulders, with short dark brown hair going gray at the temples, and a few days of stubble he never quite stayed ahead of. There was a faded scar near his left eyebrow. He wore gray mechanics coveralls with a hearing protector pushed down around his neck, scuffed boots, and on his left hand, under a work glove, a plain wedding band he had not taken off in the 3 years since Tess died. He had worked the line at the field for 2 years, fueling, towing, chalking wheels. He did the work the way he did everything now, without hurry and without complaint, and he never once told anyone that he had spent 15 years putting his name on the rotor systems that held some of the most demanding aircraft in the country up in the air. Helena Marsh climbed down from the cabin in a tailored suit with 2 executives behind her, and a schedule she was already losing. She ran Marsh Aviation, a rotorcraft company her father had founded and she had taken public, and she was due across the state in 90 minutes to close the biggest contract of her life, and her helicopter was sitting on a country apron shaking like a wet dog. Her pilot was on the phone to dispatch. A certified maintenance team was being flown out, 2 hours minimum. The lineman in coveralls came up and said quietly, "It's not your engine, it's the rotor. You've got a tracking fault and something worse underneath it. I wouldn't fly that until somebody looks at the head." Helena did not even turn all the way around. "I have certified rotorcraft mechanics in the air right now," she said. "I don't need a diagnosis from the man who pumps the fuel. Stay off my aircraft." A couple of the executives smiled. The pilot covered the phone and looked embarrassed for everyone. Wes nodded once, the way a man nods at weather he has already decided to walk through, and he did not get on her aircraft. But he did not leave either. He stood at a respectful distance with his head tilted, listening to the rotor settle, and when the blades had stopped, he walked under them without being invited and put his bare hand flat on the rotor head, the way a doctor puts a hand on a chest, and held it there, and his face changed. And in the cab of the fuel truck behind him, clipped to the visor where another man would keep a parking pass, was a folded sheet of construction paper with a child's drawing on it, a house and a sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. And Helena did not see it, and he did not show her. When the certified team finally arrived, 2 hours and 1 missed contract later, the lead mechanic put a dial indicator on the rotor head and went very quiet. And then he walked over to Helena and told her, in the careful voice mechanics use when they are telling a CEO something expensive, that there was a fatigue crack starting in the rotor head, and that if she had lifted off that apron, she would very likely not have made it across the state. He said she was lucky. He did not say that the lineman had told her the same thing 2 hours earlier for free, but Helena had heard it, and it sat in her like a splinter she could not find to pull. Wes drove home that evening to the small rented house at the end of a county road where the fields gave way to chain link. Etta was on the porch with a library book across her knees and her sneakers not quite reaching the boards. She was 8, dark-haired, with her mother's habit of going very still when she was thinking. "You're late," she said. "A helicopter had a bad day." Etta considered this. "Did you fix it?" "Somebody wouldn't let me," he said, "but I told them what was wrong." "Did they listen?" "Eventually." Etta nodded, satisfied, because in her experience, grown-ups mostly listened to her father eventually, and the ones who did it the slow way usually looked sorry about it afterward. He made dinner, soup and grilled cheese the way she liked it, and they ate at the table with the television off, the way they had eaten since Tess got sick. Afterward, Etta drew at the kitchen table while he washed the 2 plates, and when she went up she left the new drawing on the counter for him to find. A man, a girl, and in the corner, smaller, a woman with long hair drawn off to one side, watching. He set it in the drawer with the others and turned off the light. What he did not do that night, and had not done in 3 years, was open the scuffed flight case on the top shelf of the hall closet behind the towels where the rest of his life was. A folder of rotor head drawings, the corner of each one stamped and signed, a bound fatigue analysis as thick as a hymnal. A photograph of Tess on a flight line in ear protection laughing into the rotor wash. He knew exactly what was in the case. He had not been able to put it where he would see it every day, and he had not been able to burn it, so it lived on the top shelf in the dark, the way some griefs do, where you know exactly where it is and you do not reach for it. Helena could not sleep. The splinter would not come out. A lineman who pumped her fuel had diagnosed a fatigue crack in a rotor head by tilting his head at the sound and laying a hand on the metal, and her certified team had needed a dial indicator and 2 hours to find the same thing. In the morning, she did the thing her father would have told her never to do where the staff could see her doing it. She had her engineering office pull the design history of the rotor head on her own executive aircraft, the head that had nearly come apart under her, and the head that, she already knew, was the same basic design flying on every aircraft in the Marsh fleet and the one going into the contract she had missed. The engineer of record on the original rotor head design, the man whose name was on the foundational patent her entire company flew on, was named Wesley A. Carver. There was a photograph clipped to an old certification file, a younger man in a flight test jacket, leaner but the same steady eyes. The lineman who pumped her fuel had designed the rotor that held up her entire company, and he had told her, for free, that it was about to kill her, and she had told him to stay off her aircraft. She found Della Ruiz in the maintenance hangar that afternoon, a woman in her 60s who had been an airframe and power plant mechanic and quality inspector on the line for 30 years. And Della set down her torque wrench and looked at Helena a long time, the way an old hand looks at a young CEO when she is deciding how much truth she has earned. "You finally pulled the file," Della said. "I wondered how long it'd take." She wiped her hands. "Wes Carver designed that rotor head when your father still ran this place. Best rotorcraft man I ever turned a wrench for, and the most careful. He used to say a rotor's the one part of a helicopter that has no second chance, so you build it like the people you love are riding under it." She looked out at the line. His wife rode under it. Tess flew flight test for the program. That's how they met, over a vibration survey. Then she got sick, and he took leave to be with her, and after she died, he couldn't walk back into a building full of rotors. So he let it all go and took a job on the line at a little field, because he wanted to be near aircraft without being responsible for whether anybody came home in them. Della's jaw tightened. You should ask why a man like that left a company that needed him. And you should ask who's been signing the certifications since he did. "I can't leave it," Helena said. "No," Della said. "I don't suppose you can." That evening, Wes was fixing the brake on Etta's bicycle in the yellow square of the porch light when the dark car pulled up and Helena got out. She did not come past the gate. "You're Wesley Carver," she said. "You designed the rotor. The whole fleet flies on your head. You told me mine was cracking, and I told you to get off my aircraft, and you were right, and you designed the thing you were warning me about." He tested the brake with his thumb. "I pump fuel," he said. "Don't," she said. "Please. I'd be dead on a hillside if I'd lifted off when you told me not to. I run a company that flies, top to bottom, on a rotor with your name on it, and I didn't know you were standing on my line. And I think there's something wrong with that rotor that's bigger than my one aircraft, and you're the only person alive who can tell me what it is." Behind him, a small voice said, "Dad? Who is it?" And Etta appeared at his elbow in her pajamas, looking up at the woman in the fine coat with the frank assessment children give to strangers. "Someone from an airfield," Wes said. "Go on up, I'll be in to read." The girl studied Helena a moment longer and went. Wes wiped his hands on a rag and looked at the woman in his doorway. And then, because she had not come to gloat and he could see it, he stepped back and let her in. At the kitchen table, with Etta asleep, he told her the shape of it without the wound at the center. He had been a rotorcraft engineer, the man they trusted with the part that has no second chance. He had designed the rotor head her father's company was built on, and he had built it the way he built everything, with the people he loved riding under it. Then his wife Tess, who had flown flight test on his own program, who had laughed into the rotor wash, had gotten sick, and he had spent the last year of her life beside her instead of at the test stand, and after she died, he could not walk back into a building full of the machines that had been their whole life together. So he had let the work go and taken a job on the line at a quiet field, 10 minutes from his daughter's school, where no one would ask him to put his name on anything that carried people into the sky. "That crack in your head wasn't a one-off," he said when she pressed. A fatigue crack like that means the part is reaching the end of a life somebody calculated wrong, or somebody changed the part after me and didn't recalculate. If it's in your aircraft, it's in your fleet, and it's in whatever you were about to sell. Somebody knows. A rotor head doesn't start cracking across a whole fleet without an engineer somewhere choosing not to say so. Helena was quiet for a moment. "Who signs the airworthiness certifications now?" she said. "You tell me," Wes said. "That's where it starts. A rotor doesn't certify itself safe. Somebody held the pen." Dale Crandall was 56 and had been the vice president of engineering at Marsh Aviation for 9 years, since not long after Wes Carver walked away, and he had inherited a problem he had decided, very early, to manage rather than fix. Carver's rotor head was a magnificent piece of design, but a batch of forgings from a cost-saving supplier Crandall had brought in ran a hair soft and under the worst loads they had begun across years and thousands of hours to grow fatigue cracks exactly where Carver's own original analysis had warned they would if the material ever slipped. Carver had written a safety bulletin about that very risk before he left, calling for tighter inspection and an eventual redesign. Fixing it now, recalling and replacing rotor heads across a fleet, would cost a fortune and would certainly cost Marsh the military contract that was about to close. So Dale Crandall had solved the problem the way he solved most problems. He had buried Carver's bulletin, kept the cheap forgings flying, and signed a fleet airworthiness recertification declaring the rotor head sound. And because a recertification of a foundational design carried more weight with the original designer's name on it, he had signed it with Wesley Carver's name, a signature traced from the old design package, and assumed the man was gone for good and would never see his own name vouching for the thing that was about to fail. Helena asked Della whether anything survived from Carver's time, the real analysis, the original bulletin. Della looked at her a long time, then went to a gray steel cabinet at the back of the hangar that she had quietly kept the only key to for 9 years, and drew out a thick folder. "Wes told me to recycle his files when he left," Della said. "I shredded the routine stuff. I couldn't shred the safety analysis because Tess checked the load numbers in it the year before she got sick. And it felt like shredding her." Inside was Carver's original rotor head fatigue analysis, his true signature on the cover, and the safety bulletin he had written before he left, calling for inspection intervals and a redesign if the forgings ever changed. Clipped to it, something Della had added that week, a printout a sympathetic clerk in the certification office had slipped her, an email from Dale Crandall's account to a supplier manager. One line: "File the recert under the designer's name, shelve the fatigue bulletin, the contract can't survive a recall." Helena held the page and felt the floor of her own company tilt under her, 60 stories of trust standing on a part she now knew was cracking under every aircraft she owned. She went back to the county roadhouse on a Thursday, and this time Etta opened the door first and looked up and said, "You're the lady who told my dad to get off the helicopter. Because children repeat the parts adults wish they wouldn't." Wes came out of the kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder, and Helena laid the bulletin and the forged recertification side by side on his table, and he understood at once. He read it slowly, the load-bearing part first, the way he read anything that mattered. When he saw Tess's initials on the load numbers in his old analysis, he set his hand flat on the page and held it there, and his knuckles went white, and then the breath went out of him, and his hand opened again, deliberate, the way of a man who had decided a long time ago not to make a fist in front of his daughter. Then he looked at the signature on the recertification for a long moment. "That isn't my hand," he said quietly. "It's close. He got the C wrong. I open it. I never close the loop. My wife used to say I signed like I was still holding a wrench. He's run my rotor for 9 years, and he never once watched how the man who designed it signs the thing that says people can fly under it." He almost smiled. It did not reach anywhere. "I built that part so the people I loved could ride under it. He put my name on a lie that's going to drop it on strangers. Those are not the same signature, no matter how close he traced it, because mine meant something, and his is just ink." Etta had come back in her socks and crossed straight to Helena and held up a fresh drawing, the way she did with people she had decided about, 3 figures now, a man, a girl, and a woman with dark hair, holding hands under a yellow sun. Helena took it in both hands like it was something that might break. She had not been given anything for free in a very long time. Wes watched his daughter, and then he watched the woman holding the drawing, and the hardness he carried loosened by one notch. "I came to give you the truth," Helena said. "You deserve to see what he did with your name." "You came because you don't have anyone to tell when you're tired," Wes said. He was not unkind about it. She did not answer, which was its own answer. "The contract signs Friday," she said. "A ceremony at the plant, the customer, the press, the board. Dale's presenting the Rotor as the safest in its class. If it signs, that defect goes out across a fleet and into a service that flies people every day, and the first anyone hears of it is when one comes apart in the air." Wes stood and folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. "Then we go Friday," he said, and she noticed that he had said "we," and she did not remark on it, because she had already learned that with him the important words came in small, and you did not chase them. Dale Crandall learned that Helena had pulled the design history from a clerk who owed him a favor, and he moved the way frightened, careful men move, smoothly. On Thursday, a man Wes did not know was parked across from Etta's school at pickup with a phone held low. Della called that evening to say a stranger had been in the hangar, asking which lineman had touched the CEO's rotor. Wes took Etta to Tess's mother across the county and stood in the doorway and told the old woman to lock everything and open the door for no one until he came back. Etta held his sleeve. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. "No, baby," he said. "Somebody else is. I'm just the one who's going to say so." That night, for the first time in 3 years, he took the scuffed flight case down from the closet shelf. He needed the original analysis, the real bulletin, a true sample of his hand for the examiner. He lifted out the drawings and the bound analysis and the photograph of Tess laughing into the rotor wash, and he sat with the picture a while, and he did not cry. He had done that, but something clenched in him for 3 years, let go by 1 degree. He opened the analysis to the page where Tess had checked the load numbers, and beside one column she had written in the margin in her own hand, "Build it like I'm the one flying it, because I usually am," and he read it twice. Then he understood that a man had taken the most careful thing he had ever done, the part he built so the people he loved could come home, and forged his name onto a lie that would drop it on strangers, and that he was the only one alive who could read the metal and say so. He left the case down off the shelf this time, where he could reach it, and found he did not mind it being there. The contract signing filled the assembly floor of the Marsh plant on Friday morning, a finished helicopter gleaming on a stand, 300 people in chairs, the customer's delegation, the press, the board. Dale Crandall stood at the lectern beside the aircraft in a sharp suit, smiling the smile of a man who had already counted the votes. Helena was meant to give the welcome. She stepped to the microphone instead. "Before we sign," she said, "I'd like to introduce the engineer who designed the rotor this whole company flies on," and the floor turned, and Wes walked out from beside the aircraft. He had traded the coveralls for the one dark suit he owned, 10 years out of fashion, pressed that morning. He carried the scuffed flight case. He did not look at the customer's delegation. He found Della at the edge of the crowd and gave her the smallest nod, and the old mechanic's jaw worked once, and then Wes set the case on the lectern. "My name is Wesley Carver," he said. "I designed the rotor head this company was built on. I built it so that the part of a helicopter that has no second chance would never be the part that failed." He let it sit. "Years ago, I wrote a safety bulletin warning that if anyone ever changed the forgings, that head would start to crack. Someone changed the forgings, someone buried my bulletin, and someone signed a certification telling this customer the rotor is sound, with my name on it. I never signed that. Whoever traced it got the letter wrong, the way a man does when he's copying a thing instead of meaning it." The screen behind him changed. Helena put up his original fatigue analysis beside the forged recertification, the true signature beside the traced one, the difference ringed in red by an examiner 2 days fast, the bulletin he had written, the photograph of the cracked head from her own aircraft. Then the email, 1 line, file the recert under the designer's name, shelve the fatigue bulletin. The contract can't survive a recall. "My wife checked the load numbers in that analysis," Wes said, and his voice did not rise. "She flew under this rotor. She wrote in the margin to build it like she was the one in the seat, because she usually was. The man who buried the warning and forged my name to keep this fleet flying on a cracking part is standing on this floor. I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here, so the record says the truth about the thing that holds these aircraft in the sky, before it tells the truth on its own, at altitude, to people who trusted it. He looked once toward the back, at the line mechanics and the fuelers and the assembly crew who had come, the people who turned the wrenches and trusted the paper. These people sign their work with their hands every day, he said. I'd like them on the record, too. The silence had weight. Dale Crandall stood, and his face had gone the color of the paper the lies were printed on. You quit 9 years ago, he said. You pump fuel at a country strip. You don't get to walk in here and ground a fleet. Wes looked at him and did not raise his voice. I put my hand on one of them on Tuesday, he said. It told me everything you spent 9 years hiding. I don't need a title. I just need you to know I still remember how I sign a thing that carries people, and you never learned the difference because you never built anything you'd put someone you loved under. Helena took the microphone. The signing is canceled, she said. Every aircraft in this fleet is grounded as of this minute. The customer is being told the truth this morning. An independent inspection begins today, and the forged certification and the buried bulletin are going to the Aviation Authority and the Attorney General before noon. 2 investigators were already at the edge of the floor, and Dale Crandall walked to them without resistance, which was worse than if he had run. In the weeks after, the story moved through the aviation press and then the wires. Crandall was charged with forgery, fraud, and reckless endangerment, and the cost-cutting supplier arrangement he had buried unwound itself under a subpoena. 2 board members who had pushed the contract resigned. Helena declined every interview and gave one written statement, 11 sentences long, and signed her name to it. She grounded the fleet at a cost that nearly took the company under and replaced every rotor head to Carver's original specification, and did not complain about the price because the alternative had a number she refused to put a dollar against. She met the families of 2 earlier hard landings the old certification had quietly papered over and sat through whatever they needed to say and did not interrupt. Then she built a fund for aviation safety whistleblowers and for the families of those lost to defects that someone chose to hide, and named it the Tess Carver Fund, after a flight test pilot she had never met who used to check the load numbers herself before she had told Wes she was going to. Wes did not go back to the design office full-time, but he let the company list him, quietly, as the independent reviewer who signed off on the Rotor program, and he walked the line again with his hand on the metal and his head tilted at the sound, and he taught the young engineers the one thing his own teacher had taught him, that the part with no second chance gets built like someone you love is riding under it, or it does not get built at all. He kept a few shifts on the line at the little field, too, because he liked the quiet of it, and because the work asked nothing of him but care, and care was the one thing he had never run out of. On a gray morning in March, Helena drove him to the cemetery at the edge of the county where Tess was buried, and she stayed 3 steps back while he crouched and set something small on the grass before the stone, a single rotor balance weight, no bigger than a coin, that he had carried in his pocket for 9 years without ever quite knowing why. She heard him say, "Low, not quite to anyone. Somebody put my name on a lie, Tess, and I took it back. Then, softer, you'd have grounded the whole fleet that first afternoon and dared them to argue." He did not say more. Helena did not come closer. She understood that her place at that moment was not nearer, and that there are conversations a man has with a stone that a living person is only allowed to stand near and not inside. On the drive back, neither of them spoke, and the silence was not heavy, only full. Helena started coming by on the weekends, first with a reason and then without one. She traded her heels for boots that got scuffed and learned the names of Etta's library books and let the girl beat her at a card game whose rules changed whenever Etta was losing. One evening, she watched Wes teach Etta to balance a little spinning top he had machined for her, his big hands over the girl's small ones, slow, no wasted motion, the same care she had seen him turn on a rotor head, feel where it's heavy, take a little off the heavy side, never add, you can always take more off but you can't put it back. Etta got the top to spin true and looked up at him with the pride of a child trusted with a real thing. And Helena, watching from the doorway with a cup of tea going cold in her hand, understood that this was the whole of him, that the engineer and the lineman and the father were one quiet person all the way down. On a clear Saturday in spring, the three of them flew a kite off the end of the grass runway at the little field, Wes letting out the line, Etta running, Helena holding the spool and laughing in a way she did not remember doing before, and the kite climbed steady and true because Wes had built it the night before with a little more spar than it strictly needed, the margin, where he kept his conscience. Etta looked back and asked, "Are you going to stay forever?" The way children ask the questions adults are too careful to, and Helena glanced at Wes, who had stopped paying outline and was looking at her, and she said, "I'm thinking about it." Wes handed Etta the line to hold and asked her to keep it tight, and the girl did, fierce with concentration, and he stepped beside Helena. The field smelled of cut grass and avgas and spring. "You don't have to promise a child something you haven't promised yourself," he said. "I'm promising both of them," she said, at the same time. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he raised his hand and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear with the back of one knuckle, the first time he had touched her in all the weeks she had been coming. She did not pull back. He did not move closer. It was a moment, no more, but it was long enough for both of them to know it had finally arrived. Etta called that the kite was getting away from her, and it was not. But Wes went and put his hand over hers on the spool anyway, and Helena came and put her hand over both of theirs, and the three of them brought the kite down together, slow and steady, the way you bring a thing home. By summer, Etta had her own pair of ear protectors hung by the hangar door, and her own small toolbox with her name on it, and the photograph of the woman laughing into the rotor wash sat in a frame on the shelf where Wes could see it while he worked. Helena let most of the old life go, the boardrooms, the rankings, the rooms where an aircraft was only a unit sold, and she found, by the third month, that she did not miss any of it. She had started flying out to the little grass field on Saturdays, just to sit on the bench by the fuel pump and watch him work, and she found that the part of her week she guarded most fiercely now was the part with no schedule in it at all. She kept the cracked rotor head from her own aircraft on a stand in her office where the awards used to sit, not as a trophy, but as a question, and when a meeting started to drift toward the cheap and easy answer, she would look at it and feel the room get honest again. A man had been told to get off a helicopter he had designed by the woman whose life it was about to end on a rotor he had built so that the people he loved could come home. Some people put their worth where the whole world can read it, painted on the side of an aircraft, printed on a contract. Others put it in the part that has no second chance, the part nobody sees until the day it has to hold, and you only learn. It was there when a man lays his bare hand on the metal, and the metal tells him the truth.